Hi, I think it's on the hour, so we'll kick off. My name's James Barclay. I head up the client success team here at Passle. Thank you very much for joining. This is the second Insiders Club we've run this year. We've got 2 more coming this year, so keep an eye out for the future ones. Got a fabulous presenters today from our clients. We've got Phil Reed-Smith, Jenny at Michael Best, Alex at Baker McKenzie. All of them have been driving real change within their organizations. Digital transformation has obviously accelerated over the last year, and you're going to get a lot of takeaways and a lot of solid advice. If you could, please use the chat function. Everyone on this call, kind of friends and family of Passle, so to use the chat function. Obviously, we're going to be sharing content afterwards as well. But without further ado, I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully this will work. So you can see we've got building marketing and business development capabilities at scale. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Eugene McCormick, who is talking with Phil McGowan, who's Director of Corporate Communications at Reed-Smith. Reed-Smith have been delivering Passle at scale, and Phil and his team have worked really effectively, centrally coordinating and driving the kind of change that I know a lot of you are interested in. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Eugene.
Cheers, James. It's quite an old photo. I look a lot younger, a few less miles on the clock. Phil, thanks for taking the time to join us today. It's probably worth giving a little bit of context on who Phil is and why he's such a perfect person to kick off today. Started his life as a journalist, working for the likes of the Associated Press, Baltimore Sun, and then about 8 years ago, Phil made the switch over to the dark side, joining the legal industry. Now he's Global Comms Director at Reed-Smith. And in short, there's not really too many better people to open up today's conversation. We're really going to try and keep this interactive, so please jump in the chat function and send over your questions, and we'll pepper them throughout, and we'll give Phil a good grilling as we go through today. As James said, today we're looking at developing sort of marketing and business development strategies at scale, and I think there can be no greater example of that, and certainly the legal industry has been pretty amazing when we look at durability, adaptability due to COVID-19. But actually, COVID-19 has been a real opportunity for BD and marketing teams globally to shine, because they're the ones connecting the disparate attorneys with their disparate clients and helping add value. They're really the glue. So it was the BD and marketing teams which facilitated this approach. And I think one of the key takeaways I've seen with my clients is a real can-do attitude, and that's all come from the BD and marketing team. So Phil, your team are a class example of that. Over the past 18 months, you've been rolling out technology globally, and COVID obviously threw a little bit of a spanner in the works and probably made things a bit spicier. But yeah, what would you feel the key takeaways from the last year for you? And indeed, when you approach a big project, how do you start? How do you bring people along with you? And how do you get these big initiatives off the ground?
Right, Eugene, thank you. Thanks to Passle, and hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. So I know that I operate a little bit differently than perhaps maybe comms directors at other law firms. I mean, if you're at a really big place, your teams are disparate. They're in different regions, in different parts of the United States. They're in the UK. They're kind of span all over the world. And so in some respects, COVID wasn't such of a massive impact for us, because we were already talking on conference calls and video all the time. It was more about making the adjustment to Zoom there, but it does, you never get that sort of personal interaction. And so it makes it harder to sort of manage projects kind of in a certain way, but in a certain way it wasn't, because fortunately for us, it was, our setup was already kind of baked in the cake, so to speak. But just as far as like big projects and how you might sort of consider them, I've been at Reed-Smith for a little bit over 2.5 years. And I think it's really about sort of when you start in a position of thinking about what is the strategy, and if there's not quite one that's fully formed, then how do you need to be talking about that and sharing that strategy, and sharing the shortcomings and the things that you need to do, instead of saying that over and over and over. And it's also my experience from working in the government. If you want to make policy change, you can't just say something once and be persuasive one time. That doesn't matter. you be able to say something over and over to the point where it resonates and people understand, like, okay, so what is digital transformation for your law firm, and how do we need to deliver that? And what are the tactics that you essentially need to employ? So you need to convince people of kind of the overall sort of what is the premise, and then you move from there. And so you do that with the lawyers, you do that with your CMO, you do that with others on your marketing team. And I will say this again, you need to have BD in your corner, because they are the direct path to the partners. I can go and talk to partners all day, every day. We have 740 partners at the firm. Many don't know me and have personal relationships, but the business development teams do. And so I need to go and sell what I'm doing through them so they can articulate that and help make the case on my behalf.
What would you say is the biggest challenge to those selling? You have to bring everyone along with you. You mentioned the different stakeholders, lawyers, CMO, the marketing team. There's quite a few people you need to bring along with you. What's the biggest challenge? You mentioned actually the disparate nature of your business wasn't one of them, whereas for lots of our clients, it was, moving to a fully remote setup. Do you have a process that do you have a few key steps which you always go to start off with, or do you sort of make it up as you go along?
So, I mean, I'll take one example with SEO, and we just onboarded a tool at the start of the year. And what was that process? That was at least 7 or 8 months beforehand, kind of formally, and even before that, it was kind of teeing that up over the year prior. So going around and talking to partners and lawyers and getting a sense from them, this is in the pre-COVID area, obviously, and trying to figure out kind of what's important to the partners. And more of them were starting to say, we'd like to be found on Google search. Like, that was starting to resonate. And with those who didn't say that, I was kind of making that point to them. So it's kind of building a drumbeat kind of that way. And then at the same time, it's kind of talking to our regional marketing teams and our business developers to say, this is important. Yes, relationships will drive lots of client engagement and drive sort of us to get hired, but it's not all of it. It's how can we be found by people who don't know us? And so to me, it's about being found on search. And so being able to make that case kind of throughout last year, and starting with presentations to the business development team to say, this is SEO. What is it? Why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to the partners that you work with? How does that inform editorial strategy? And making the case 6 months ago, 8 months ago, that to the business developers that you are high-end editorial advisors. It is a place where your practice strategy and your editorial strategy sort of line up, and it's all not going to sort of cross right over. But some things are going to be more important than others, and so they're in a unique position to be able to have that view and see that. And so it's about persuading them to say, this is important, this is why, and no insult to business developers, but they're very good at the jobs that they do, but I'm not expecting them to be the most sophisticated on all aspects of marketing, just like I'm not either. So you go into it with the understanding that you've got to create some awareness and build understanding. If you're just dictating to people, you will not get very far any place you go.
It's almost an educational role you're talking about, but it's going back to the sales role. It's working out what is making everyone tick, what's in it for me, but for each individual person, each individual team, the regional BD teams as well, and then creating awareness. But also, it's the higher level strategic role of tying it all together into the bigger plan and the wider strategy. You mentioned a number of different people there in personnel. Did you feel like you had the right team around you to begin with to drive this? You mentioned SEO, you use Passle, you have other tools as well. Have you had to bring in subject matter experts in these different areas, or did you feel you had the team ready there and then?
So I would say that I have the right team. I just wish that my team was bigger to handle all this. I mean, you're dealing with 1,700 lawyers across 3 continents. So, and we just don't, for example, like our digital operation is based on the East Coast of the US. So, we can plan things and set things up for social, but, sometimes for web postings, we're doing kind of all hours, day and night. I would love to have a team to be able to sort of globalize and be able to kind of pick up and do more of sort of the 24-hour sort of push that way.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's, you know, it's been a process to, how would I frame this? There is a rush maybe to go and build up your marketing capability. Say, I'm going to do podcasting and blogging. I'm going to build a new website. I'm going to do all these things. I need to hurry up and do it right now.
Mm-hmm.
My feeling is that you have to take the time to do it right, because your team needs to adapt not only to what they're doing, but what they are going to take on. And you don't always have the luxury of hiring more people to do the thing that you want. So again, you have time to process, onboard, and then figure out kind of, well, how do we use Passle? How do we use our SEO tool? We're now up to, we just launched our 9th podcast, and we've gone from 0 to 9, you know, since March of 2020. But that's taken months of process to kind of get there. You don't snap your fingers and do that. So you need to give your team time, and you need to hire folks who are, they don't need to know everything. They need to be adept at being able to learn the new skills that you need to stand up projects and initiatives.
So I once heard you say that good corporate communications is good BD. Do you feel that with the changes that have happened? So we've talked about, you know, bringing the right people along, assembling the right team, you know, giving people the time to actually come around to your way of thinking. With the massive changes that we've seen, you know, the huge overnight digital transformation effect of COVID-19, do you think that, you know, you mentioned podcasts, SEO, a digital first approach for law firms, do you think that's going to stick? Or do you see a sort of a hybrid model as we start to slowly go back to the office? Because a lot of our clients don't really foresee ever going back to the lunch and learns, all of the events. It's not going to be the same physical experience. It's digital first.
Right. Okay. So let me talk more broadly, you know, go back to my days at newspapers. Why have newspapers by and large struggled? Because they have not met people where they want to be, just flat out. So it is a newspaper kind of dictating, this is the information I'm going to give you in the package. I'm going to do it once a day. Then I'm going to go online and I'm going to update some things, but not other things, what have you. You know, again, it is not the most user-friendly experience. And so to me, when you talk about digital transformation and you think about marketing teams, you're thinking about how each law firm is its own publisher. And so how do we meet clients at a time and place of their choosing and in the format that they want? And it's really, it's like thinking hard about that and saying, well, we can't do a scattershot approach in every direction. You think about a strategy, then you think about, well, who are the early adopters, or those who want to be the adopters, the evangelists? So there are lawyers on every team who say, well, I want to do one thing or another. Okay, if that fits in with where you want to go, then go and take them, because it's easier to get those people than to try to persuade a bunch of skeptics who perhaps maybe don't grasp what you're trying to sell. But again, it's about the notion of, how do you meet clients where? You know, you've got a whole bunch of different capabilities. You got e-coms, you got blogging, you got PR, you know, you've got a whole bunch of spokes on the wheel. So which ones make the most sense for the firm that you're at? And that's regardless of whether you're a firm of our size or you're something much smaller. And then being able to persuade the business developers and the partners around that notion that for the things that we do, are we delivering and meeting the client's expectation on that information flow?
So it's almost back to basics. It's how does the client want to interact with us, and we sort of fit to what they want to do. I suppose maybe on that front, it'd probably be very interesting for the people online, where it's hard enough to predict where we're going to be next Tuesday, never mind in 12 months time. But if you wouldn't mind giving a little punt into the dark, you've talked about the big change which you've undergone and how it takes time. In 12 months time, what do you foresee you and your team focusing on? And if you could even take an even bigger punt into the dark, in 5 years time, how do you see your role, and how do you see the business interacting with clients? Will it be radically different?
So I'll touch a little bit on the prior question that you asked to try to start this up, Eugene. So essentially, yes. Are we going to have clients who are going to come back into our offices? Yes. And so are we going to need to have some printed materials, what have you? Yes. Do I think that that becomes ever less important? I do. I think that there's a branding component, obviously, that is essential to having that. But I think that more and more is digital first, and simply rolling out with a PDF. And that's kind of one of the changes that I'm working through right now, which is, we're good at creating all kinds of reports, and then we put them in PDF form, and then you send out the link or you send out the attachment, and you are challenging people to navigate and look for the needle in a haystack of a report that's potentially 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 150 pages. And quite frankly, the notion is ridiculous. People don't have time, they don't read. So if you start from the notion that people don't read anymore and they're scanning, that should change your entire view on what marketing is about. And that goes all the way down to dense PowerPoints and talking to every slide at that level. Like, people don't have time, they don't have the interest, they don't have the inclination. They're just not built that way anymore. I mean, I've read studies about how we are in a search environment and how that is literally changing the wiring of our brains, because we don't have to retain information or interact with others in the same way to get that information. We simply go to search, and 80% of all web journeys start at search. So if you take it from there and say, how does that inform? Well, then we need to be found on search on the things that matter most to our organization. Our assets are our lawyers. And so how do we put them sort of first and foremost? And how do you sort of scrape away the superfluous crap that gets in the way of that gets in the way? And there's a certain amount of storytelling, but it's about sort of joining up the relationship. So, to me, how do things change? There are some law firms that are moving more and more to video. You see LinkedIn now. I mean, they just offered up, do you want to do a quick video to associate with your profile? So I think that people want personalization, and they want to be able to layer, you want to be able to layer things so you can understand and say, well, I want to know about Phil. I want to know all about Phil. Just like I want to know about a lawyer who I'm prepared to spend $1,000 an hour to go handle my matter. And I want to know everything about that person. And so you present information. So if people want to go all the way to the bottom of the well, they can do that. And if they also want to find out who you are in 15 seconds, and that's all they need, that again, you've presented the information in such a way that I don't have to go further down than what I have to. And so I think that sensibility informs everything about what law firm marketing, quite frankly, what broader organizations do going ahead.
Well, that was very comprehensive. I've just realized I've been going off on the things that I'm most interested in rather than sticking to the original script. So I'll try and pull it back slightly and say, we were talking originally about building a process at scale. And you mentioned a number of things. You mentioned the right team, giving it time to actually bed in, using the right technology, all focused on the customer. Could you give us sort of the 2 or 3 key tenets, just as we wrap up in the next minute or two, which are successful, and anything or any failures, anything you wish to share with us, or little lessons that you've learned along the way, so try not to make that mistake, because by and large, everyone on this call will be in a similar boat to you. They'll be trying to do a big project at scale.
Right. So the first thing is that does your big project align with strategy or not? People want to know why they're doing things. And so if it's just a leadership ask, like somebody from high has said, you're going to do this, then you tell people that, and then off you go and you go get it done. But if it relates to strategy, hopefully you have teed up the strategy over the course of weeks, months, and perhaps years. So then you know how this plugs in. Because at the end of the day, you want to create an exciting proposition for your team. People want to do significant things. And so you want to be able to say how this project plugs in, so you can bolden people. And then essentially is that you've got to be able to sort of balance the notion of listening to your teams and getting their advice on how to proceed, but also being able to provide direction. You cannot outsource direction to your teams, because that's ripe for failure. You've got to be able to indicate and lay out markers, for your teams, but you also want to hear them as well. And I guess the last thing is, because I know we're coming up on time, Eugene, which is that to me, it's about setting early mile markers. So if you go 40 or 50% into your project, you're too far in if you've made a mistake to then revert and go back. You invested too much time and perhaps too much money. Yeah. So you go 15, 20% into your project and say, maybe I don't know exactly how this is all going to end up, but does this seem viable? And if you don't have that, and that's, I guess, the last point I would make, Eugene, which is that in this era of COVID, post-COVID, maybe not engaging in person, don't do everything by email to sort out a big project. You need to stand people up on Zoom or on phone calls or what have you. People need to understand what's being done, when, how, and that affects other people. So if you can stand up teams and get them together, you're not only building camaraderie, but you're building camaraderie around things that matter, the big project at hand. So don't give that the short shrift. Make sure that you're bringing folks together so they understand and can help you problem solve in the moment.
That was a really useful last bit. I'm just going to squeeze in one last question, and I'm sure Sam will be annoyed at me for running over time. But we've had a really good question here from Alex Stevens, who is the Global Comms Lead at Cobra and Kim. Now, he asks, on the subject of digital lead generation, do you envision a future where Marcom's business development can wholly own the process of reaching, engaging, and converting potential clients, and so almost taking the lawyer out of that process? And then it's caveated by saying, or is this completely idealistic, and will lawyers always need to be an integral part of this process, regardless of how digital first the business is?
I'm not sure that lawyers would ever be comfortable enough to completely have that outsourced. That said, I think if you think about best and highest use, you think about like digital aggregators. I'm thinking Mondax, I'm thinking Lexology, and the data that they provide to help sort of pinpoint which client is reading what thing, and then trying to understand in the news cycle, is there something that is occurring in their world? Why are they searching and wanting to read certain information? And so I think that there's much more set up to understand the customer journey, and for us to lay that out, at least at a minimum, to the lawyers and say, we've got people on IP addresses that are coming in through the web and they're viewing X, Y, and Z. They're looking at certain profiles or reading certain information. Have they been a client before or not? And so we can package that up and tee that up at a minimum to the lawyers and say, I think we need to go to them. And we need to ask them about the thing that they are clearly inquiring about or want information about. And so that, to me, is that's being kind of proactive with the information we have. And I think that, Eugene, to your earlier question, I think that that's how you kind of turn it for the long term marketing wise, which is how do you take that information and layer it to understand the client need, and then for marketing to come back on that, perhaps with the help of the lawyer.
Okay, so it's almost, again, being that glue, packaging it up and making it useful for the right person at the right time.
Right.
Wicked. I'm going to have to finish it there because I know Sam will get angry at me again. But I just want to say, Phil, that was brilliant. So thank you very, very much for your time and for making the time indeed for all of our for this panel. I'm going to throw it back to James here, who's going to introduce the next section. But yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Phil. That's absolutely fantastic. Nice and quick, 20 minutes, 22 minutes. Absolutely brilliant. We've recorded this. We've got a lot of information there, so we're going to send that out to you all afterwards. So don't worry. Going into our next session now. Absolutely wonderful to introduce Jenny Connolly and Alex from Baker McKenzie. I'm going to pass you over to Sarah. What we're going to cover now really is the nuts and bolts. So the structuring, resourcing, effective thought leadership. I work with both Alex and Jenny. They have done an amazing job of driving the change that they want to achieve within their organizations. Get your pens and pads ready because there's going to be heaps of takeaways and heaps of great advice. Without further ado, I will pass over to Sarah.
Thank you, James. Just going to share my screen. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for joining our second Insiders Club event of the year. It's great to see so many attendees, some familiar faces and some new faces as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And as James says, we're going to focus this next Q&A session on how you can structure and resource a thought leadership program. So a lot of you on this call are going to be at very similar stages where you're running a thought leadership program. That might be the beginning of one, it might be one that's built up a lot of momentum, but you're going to have a very similar end goal, and it's going to be to scale this thought leadership program across your organization and fundamentally change the behavior of the experts to get them thinking differently about content and to take ownership of that content. And two people who have done this amazingly well at their firms are joining me on this session today. So I want to say a big welcome to, firstly, Jennifer Conley, Senior Business Development Manager at Michael Best & Friedrich. Hi, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining today's session.
Happy to. Thank you.
And Alex Williams, Business Development Manager at Baker McKenzie. So hi, Alex.
Hi, everyone. I'm not as stern as my photo.
Brilliant. And for those who don't know me, I'm Sarah Strachan. I work in the client success team at Passle, so I get the pleasure of working with our amazing clients such as Jenny and Alex to help them roll out our technology, but also help them scale their thought leadership programs. So what we're going to be doing today, it's really interactive. As James says, get your pens and papers out, because I'm going to be handing it over to the experts and asking Jenny and Alex exactly how they've achieved massive success in their thought leadership programs. Also, please do pop some questions in the chat box or the Q&A box. I'm going to ask them to Jenny and Alex throughout this presentation. And yeah, as I said, really interactive. So we'll go through them at the end, as well as through different points of this session. Now, just before we start and jump into a question, I'm going to hand it over to the audience as well. So I'd like you, if you have a second, to pop an answer into the chat box to the following question. So it doesn't have to be long, maybe a sentence or even a word, but what is your biggest challenge that you face when rolling out a thought leadership program? What is the #1 barrier? So pop that into the chat box. We'll review them in a little bit, and I'll see if Jenny and Alex face those same challenges, and we'll see if they have any tips for how to overcome those. Now, jumping straight into it, just before I ask Jenny and Alex some questions, I just want to show you how well they have run their thought leadership program and the success that they've achieved. So starting with Michael Best, Jenny has been championing the Passle rollout. So they rolled out Passle last October. And since then, they've created over 200 insights by 36 of those authors. So a huge amount of content has been created. Now that has generated over 31,000 reads on Lexology. Now, the amazing thing about this is that they are outranking the AmLaw 100 firms. And a lot of those firms are a lot bigger than Michael Best and probably have a lot more resources. So it's absolutely incredible to see Michael Best really, getting their name out there amongst these big organizations in the US. And that's really down to what Jenny is driving. Also, over 5,000 different organizations are reading the Michael Best Insights. So they're getting so much engagement from some really key organizations. So really, really great to see. Now, moving on to Baker McKenzie and Alex and what he's achieved in the rollout there. So Alex rolled out Passle at the beginning of November last year to the global IP tech team. So that's around 200 lawyers across 4 different regions: APAC, EMEA, Latin America, and North America. Now, in that time, they've written over 240 posts from 75 authors, and that's from all of those 4 regions. So Alex has done an amazing job of getting buy-in from all the regions and from really promoting Passle and the thought leadership program around the world. And as a result of that, they've had over 53,000 reads of their content across Lexology and the website, and engagements from some really amazing firms. So as you can see, really successful thought leadership programs are being run by Jennifer and Alex, and we're going to really talk through now how they've achieved that in their organizations. Now, just to put that into a bit of context quickly before we jump into it, That is 20 times more content that the Michael Best lawyers and the Baker McKenzie lawyers are writing than the average lawyer. Because we know the average lawyer creates around 0.5 insights per year. So absolutely smashing it in terms of content creation. So the first question I want to ask, and this is before even diving into how to structure and how to resource the thought leadership program, taking it back to the start. So how do you encourage lawyers to write thought leadership? And I'm going to hand this one over to you first, Jenny. So before you even start the thought leadership program, how do you change the mindset of your fee earners to get them thinking that writing content is a good idea?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that's a key part of developing a successful thought leadership program. And I think one of the key factors that we focused on is when we mentioned Passle and started the launch program is figuring out who are our key fee earners or who are our key promoters across the firm that can promote this to their leadership, to their attorneys, to the entire firm. And we got their buy-in. And basically the way we did that is we did a lot of training in the beginning with those fee earners, and then we built from there. So that's kind of our strategy, and it's been working quite well. Now some of our top promoters, after they use the system and promote it across the firm to their other team members, they may not be as active, but they at least can continue to be a promoter. And that's what we found has been most effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same question to you, Alex.
I think, yeah, it's the same for Jenny, really. It's going through and working out who your champions are and who are going to be your priority fee earners to start off with, but also give them some guidance. So we tried to put parameters around the topic areas each fee earner would be focusing on. So just making sure from the outset, your fee earners aren't thinking, oh gosh, I've got to write everything about IP and technology. It's actually my key areas are gaming, platforms, and social media. So just restricting it down to start off with to help then guide people as we went forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've posed a question to the audience on what's the biggest challenge for you when rolling out a thought leadership program, but we'll go on to these in a bit. But what do you think the biggest challenge is for the fee earners? What is the biggest barrier for them to actually create content at the moment?
Time. It's the one I've seen coming up a lot in the chat, especially at this time of year when lots of people are coming to closing and sorting out kind of final billing. They don't have the time. When you've got fee earners on 130%, how do you get them to write anything? Which the answer really is reminding them that you can do something in the Passle platform within a few minutes, and not have to focus on something for a really long time. So just reminding them also, however, that you've got to have continuous BD. You can't do peaks and troughs of suddenly, oh, I've got loads of time now, so I'll do all my BD. It's got to be a continuous journey and a whole story across the narrative. So it's just reminding them that I totally get they're busy and that they haven't got much time, but just put in 5-10 minutes, 15 minutes even on maybe 1 or 2 posts every few weeks, and that's all they need to do. And putting it in that context rather than you need to spend half a day writing a 3-page article, that just seems to work a lot better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's one of the biggest barriers that I think a lot of our clients face. Have you found any particular ways to overcome that barrier of time with the fee earners, Jenny?
Yeah, I think one of the key strategies is just talking through and helping the attorneys and team members understand that, learning a new tool, learning how to use Passle, learning how to implement it within their BD strategy and their strategy to communicate with their clients is always like they just sometimes don't want to initially take that effort. But I think once you explain to them that it's actually faster, more efficient, and easier to create content because you're building off experts that are writing the content and providing your insight, once they try it out a few times, they realize they're saving so much time, and they realize that they're providing insightful information that's relevant to their clients and to their prospects, and it's not taking as much time as they thought it would. So I think that, once you get over that barrier of telling someone, yes, there's a new tool, you have to learn how to use it, but it's going to save you time and it's going to add more value to your social media thought leadership strategy, they'll buy it in. So that's kind of what we're focusing on.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key. It's not something that you have to do on top of your already, very busy job. It's something that's going to enable you to do your job better. So that's really the key message.
I think also just make it fun. I know this sounds like a strange thing for a law firm to say. We're all very serious people, right? It's also trying to change the narrative of everyone is so conscious of everything has to be within a time frame. If you can get your lawyers to think about it in terms of, I like these topics and therefore it's something I enjoy writing about, it becomes less of a chore. So especially with some of our juniors, we've just said to them, like, what interests you? Write about that. We'd rather they write about that and actually get content out than they're stressing about having to come up with a topic and then write nothing. So equally that sort of approach in terms of just write what you're interested in, what your clients are interested in, that's fine with us. And that also will get you more attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost, you have the ability with the content to gamify that process and reward success and really highlight that. And I know you do that a lot on your internal comms, Alex, and I know you do, Jenny, as well, just feedback, how well they're doing and almost add a bit of an incentive and pry on the competitive nature of lawyers. Brilliant. So moving on to the next question. So how do you set goals and define success? So very much a nice follow on from what we were just talking about there. So I'm going to hand this one over to you, Alex, because I know when you launched Passle back in November, you set yourself and your team a goal of achieving 100 insights by 50 different lawyers. And that was by the end of December. So it was a 2-month period. So why did you set that goal? How do you keep setting goals and how do you define the success of a thought leadership program?
I just like a challenge. So I thought I'd go for a slightly ridiculous target that I might not be able to achieve. And if we hit it, that would be great, which we did hit it. I think in terms of setting goals, I think actually my view has slightly changed on this. So when we started the process, it really was about proof of use, showing that the platform works and that it's really helping the lawyers. So hitting key stats in terms of number of posts, number of fee earners using the tool. But post that, now that we've hit those targets, it's trying to continually create new targets. And for us at the moment, we're trying to work with the regions as to what they need and therefore set the targets within those teams. So when you're rolling out globally, there are certain markets that are more advanced than others. That's just how the world is. So therefore, the markets which are struggling a bit and still trying to build that profile up, it's working slightly more intently and setting those slightly more simple targets in terms of try and get a few posts out within a certain time period, try and make sure you've got the right number of lawyers around particular topics. For the more developed markets, it's right. How do we make sure the posts that you're writing are part of a wider narrative, that they're securing work, that they're going in front of the right clients? It depends on your markets. So the one thing I would say is at the beginning, definitely set certain goals and targets in terms of getting the right number of posts. That is showing success. The engagement is success. But after that, when you're continually getting that success, how do you then set yourself a target? And that is, to be honest, are your clients reading it? Are they liking it? Are they enjoying it? Are they interacting with it? And are you getting any work off the back of it? That's the next step. But you will have that journey continually happening at different time phases across the board when you go global.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's from a global perspective as well. But we spoke the other day, Jenny, and you were talking about even tailoring it at an individual level for the fee earners, which might not be scalable across a 1,000-person law firm, but it's really important to make sure it resonates with the fee earners and to tailor that approach.
Yeah, exactly. And completely agree with Alex on developing a plan. So our approach was, back in November, we created a launch plan and we had different goals, different KPIs that we wanted to achieve and had an idea of our training schedule and what were our key initiatives that we wanted to achieve within this first year of using Passle. And I think, we've achieved a lot of those already, and we've actually adapted our plan over the first quarter, and we've increased the amount of training that we do. We do training on a monthly basis, live webinars. Each one of our BD team members, we rotate taking that on, and we invite about 40 to 60 people. About 20 people usually show up each training session. So it's very personal. It's very we figure out who's attending. We figure out, what's the approach. If there's a certain amount of a group of people from IP that might be attending, well, some of our examples that we may provide may focus on that. And I think the key part is creating a plan, defining it. But then once you get to a point where it's growing and it's getting to the point where you want it to be, updating that plan and figuring out what's the next step. And that's exactly what Alex said as well. So now we're at the point where we're trying to also define success via ROI, whether that's a new prospect or relationship, and pull together those client success stories, because a story means so much more than saying to attorneys and everyone else, use this tool, it'll be really helpful. And having the backup for that will make it very clear to anyone that is interested in growing their thought leadership to participate. So that's kind of where we're at in our plan and where we're heading as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you both speak about it. It's important to, one of your goals and how you measure success is, are your clients engaging? Are you generating new leads off the back of creating content? How do you go about feeding that success back to the lawyers? Is there a regular plan, in terms of reporting back? How do you update them on the success you're seeing? Hand over to you first, Alex.
So for us, we're doing quarterly reports to the whole of the IP Tech team globally. So we send them, these are some of the most successful articles, these are the number of reads that we've had. That's the sort of regular piece. But on top of that, so the way the BD team is structured is we have sort of BD leads within each region. And what we've been doing is every week we're just looking, are the posts that your region have posted getting good viewership and who's interacting with it? And we're just sending regular updates. So if, for example, we see that a particular topic has suddenly got a lot of traction, which actually for us has happened over the last couple of weeks over the topic of non-fungible tokens, read all about it. It really is quite an interesting area of law. We've seen that's really suddenly gained speed very quickly. So we've reported that back to the fee earners and basically gone and said, this story is really strong. People are really enjoying this, write more. So we know this has worked over the last couple of weeks. Legally, there's not a lot to talk about, but externally, people are loving it. So it's looking at it and thinking, right, that's a topic we need to talk about right now. And therefore, what's the next phase in this narrative? So off of the back of 2 posts over 2 weeks, we've now put a structure in for another 4 posts over another few weeks. So looking at it that way, but just continuously looking at that success, seeing what's landing, seeing what's not landing, and then reworking our plan as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think there will ever be a stage, and is it a goal of yours to try and change the behavior of fee earners so they recognize this themselves? And actually, you keep feeding the success stories and who's engaging with their content, and sometimes they don't even know that themselves from sharing a post to LinkedIn. And is the end goal to get the fee earners to do this, or do you think you're always going to have to report back to them in some way?
That's a tough question. I would love to say yes, but ultimately, I think we're not there yet. It really depends on the lawyer. I think everyone who works at law firm will have experienced this. You have some who are just really technically adept. They can go into the system, look at it themselves, and they love it. Others, you're always going to need to hold a hand a little bit of the way. So I think it's kind of why BT exists, really, because unfortunately the lawyers, they need the hand holding a lot of the time when we're there to help and secure that. I think ultimately, for the time being, it's definitely falling on BD. Some lawyers will pick it up and go with it, but ultimately, will it ever fall to lawyers? I'm not sure. I wouldn't put money on it.
Right. and do you find the same with your lawyers over at Michael Best, Jenny?
Actually, I think we're lucky. Let me just put it that way. We have great promoters across the firm in leadership and throughout, and we have had several of our leadership across the firm that are fee earners as well, and rainmakers, the full gamut, and they have bought in. They are doing posts actively. Sometimes they'll do like 8 or 10 in a month based on what's going on within their certain market or industry. So I think we're really lucky that way. I think we definitely have the right buy-in, so that's really good as well. And I think it's just trying to continue to share the message. So we do monthly reports, we do quarterly reports. We've only done 1 quarterly report, but we're doing quarterly reports. And then our plan is we also share updates on a regular basis to anyone who's received training. So maybe I'll do a quick video reminder 1 week and say, hey, here's how you set your targets to create posts. Yeah. And it'll be like 1 minute long, and then our BD team will not have to keep on reminding people to create posts. So we're trying to come up with ways to make things much more easier for the attorneys, but also easier for our BD team on implementation and admin side, so that we can get more users and so that we can get more buy-in across the firm. So yeah, like I said, we're lucky. We have a lot of promoters, and we greatly appreciate all of their efforts and their ability to share how much they value the tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this leads in really nicely to the next question, because ultimately, you need to resource this project. As you say, you need to feed back to the fee earners. You're putting together videos for them. You're giving them resources that is going to make, their life a lot easier in terms of creating content. We've had a few put in the chat box as well, but their biggest challenge is how to resource a thought leadership program. So this next question we want to focus on is what are the roles and responsibilities in your program? And I'm going to hand over to you first, Jenny. So who do you get involved in a thought leadership program? What roles do they play? I know at Michael Best you have a chief growth officer, which is amazing. And do you get that chief growth officer involved? And if so, how do you get leaders in the business like that involved in thought leadership, especially if it's time poor?
Yes, I mean, that's such a great question. And I think that's key to having a successful thought leadership plan and launching Passle correctly. I think, our approach has been, we did have our chief growth officer, Susan Hollander, participate and give us the buy-in and participate in helping get other fee earners to agree and say, yes, this is something we should do. And, we did the full launch, we did the training across all of the top practice group leaders and people that lead subgroup and industry groups. That was our first training, just so that they understood what we were going to be teaching all of the other attorneys across the firm. So that was kind of our first approach and our first strategy behind it. But once you launch, you also have the general support that you have to figure out from the BD team. So the way we separate that is, our BD team works with the attorneys and team members based on their assigned practice and industry groups. And that just makes it much easier. So they'll be reviewing and approving posts based on the assigned attorney. And then they also understand the context better. So it's better for them to be looking at a post than me sometimes in a certain area where I don't focus. So they'll be able to catch things and provide recommendations to the attorneys. And, I think the main thing is we do a lot of admin training. I also work with the BD team and make sure they understand all the tips and tricks, how to make sure you're adding people correctly when we have new authors and new trainers. So we have like a plan in place of, when we do training, how do we add people? And we just kind of divide and conquer as a team. And it works out really well. But there are times where, we run out of time and it's a little bit challenging. So we may have to put something to the side for a week and come back to it next week. But it's working out quite well.
Yeah, brilliant. And well, you can see that from the amazing content you're getting from the lawyers. And Alex, how do you resource this at a global scale across those 4 different regions?
With difficulty, but actually it turns out not to be so difficult. But I think the key thing for us is make sure you have people on the ground in the key regions within time zones who are able to help. With Passle, the nice thing is the requests come through very fast. You need someone, therefore, to be able to read it, approve it, and get it posted. So it really is very lucky at Baker McKenzie. We've got a global team of IP Tech BD across all of our key markets. So we have someone for the North America, we have someone for LATAM, we have someone for EMEA, we have someone for APAC, and we have someone in Australia. So I sit on the London EMEA side. So we've got that full follow the sun service. So it's about making sure we just coordinate as a team and we're constantly there. We talk to each other, we check each other's posts. There is always someone there who can ensure a post is read and is approved and put online. Equally, with local language resources, when you do go global, you will come to a point where in my own personal situation, unfortunately, I can't check Spanish or Vietnamese content. So I need to rely on my local colleagues to be able to do that. So it's just making sure you've got, as Jenny says, sometimes you just need people with specialist knowledge. So it's making sure those are part of your team and you've got the coverage there. I think also, as Jenny said, it's having the rainmakers and the key fee earners that are going to drive this on board on the lawyer side, so that people are creating content and the lawyers get buy-in. But the other thing from a global point of view is make sure you've got your web team involved, make sure you've got your tech team, innovation, marketing, comms, etc. at a global level. Just make sure they're looped in, they're aware of what's going on, how it fits into wider initiatives going on. And that would just help in the long run, especially website and tech team, always very helpful to have on site for integration and making sure things work. So it's creating that network and just helping people understand. And as Jenny said, it's about training and knowledge. It really is just showing them how it works. This is what the benefit is. And that really applies to anyone involved when you're launching Passle. It's just showing them, look, this is the benefit and this is why it's good. So let's all drive together. And once you're all in the same direction, tends to go all right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we heard from Phil as well, business developers have such strong relationships with the fee earners, and they all, as business developers, you ultimately, what the goals are of the firm, who your targets are, who the clients are. So it's so important to have those driving it across those different regions and in your firm. Just taking a slightly different angle on this, something that both Baker McKenzie and Michael Best do is you have a cross section of lawyers writing this content. So you have partners writing the content, counsel, but you also have associates. So, just handing over to you first, Alex, and then Jenny, what's your reason for including that cross section of lawyers and allowing them to create that content?
For us, it's just because they are the future partners, and equally, they are thought leaders in their own right. So a lot of the time, anyone working at a law firm knows partners don't always have that time. So getting that senior associate and associate engagement really helps in terms of driving content, just in terms of volume, but also it's a captive group of individuals who they've got the energy and they've got the drive. And on certain topics, they just know a bit more than the partners because it's something that they're really interested in and really into. So it's really just thinking about, selfishly from the firm side, what's our pipeline, who should we be promoting, and how do we show a larger team? But also just in terms of engagement, if you've got really enthusiastic people, focus on that group to start off with. So it might be that you have fewer partners and more juniors to start off with, but the more content coming through, we've seen the more partners then come and get involved because they're like, oh, I saw so-and-so was writing about this topic. I think I should be writing about this as well. And then they've started doing the same. Equally, it really helps to have your associates involved because a lot of the time they can write a post and then the partner will sign it off and just add their name to it. So sometimes it just helps in terms of getting partner content out as well. So it's just a good population to have. And also we really find a lot of our enthusiasm, and also, to be honest, some of the most interesting posts come from that group of individuals, just because they're thinking a little bit more commercially some of the time, because they really are fighting for the next promotion and to move up the rank. So it's just, we found it a really useful group of individuals to work with. And as I say, they tend to come up with the more fun posts, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's brilliant. And same question to you, Jenny. Why at Michael Best do you bring associates on board to post?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think, from business development and our perspective, I mean, we have an approach of a very strong team environment and culture at Michael Best. So, it's very important for us to ensure that associates, senior counsel, partners all have the opportunity to grow. And I think, when you look at associates and senior counsel, a lot of times, a lot of the training that you end up doing is focusing on, their branding, social media, developing a network. And this is a great component that can add to that. And I think, as Alex said, they tend to have sometimes a little bit more time, which is great. And the other thing that we've kind of noticed is, they're a little bit of a younger generation usually. So they have a little bit more adaptability and a little bit more ability to, understand like how to add things. The insights that you have that's linked to your website looks very similar to a blog. So it's a little bit more easier for the younger generation sometimes to pick up on. That being said, I think, it's great to have all participants, and we've had a couple posts that involve multiple people, and we want more of that. We want more of the team environment and team culture so that everyone's voices are heard and everyone's insights are provided.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. You're ultimately giving people a platform to voice their expertise and opinions, and it is so important that you have a diverse group to do that. And also it represents the firm. You have a cross section of lawyers at Michael Best and Baker McKenzie, so it's writing content from a cross section of lawyers represents the wider firm.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And like Alex said, sometimes they write the funner posts. So
brilliant. So next question, and again, this links with what Phil was saying earlier about using business development to reach the different lawyers in a global firm. And it's all about how you can position your program internally. And Alex, I'm going to hand this one to you first, because obviously you're driving this thought leadership program. You're doing it on a global basis, and you're trying to change the behavior and get buy-in from individuals that you don't speak to on a daily basis. You've probably not met them in person. You might have had Zoom calls with them, but you don't know their challenges. You don't know what motivates them on an individual basis. So how do you actually position a thought leadership program in your firm to get the results that you want?
So there's two things really. Firstly, it's all about profile and showing that this tool really adds value. But the second thing really, so implementing something like Passle, we've got to show at a firm like Baker McKenzie that it fits alongside certain tools that we already use. So we already as a firm, and multiple other firms are in the same situation, have a thought leadership site that might be used separately for the larger, longer form legal nitty-gritty content, or as Phil was talking about, the big legal reports that we put out. Passle has got to be complementary to that, because that stuff is still really important for our clients and for our market. Passle is about, as we've talked about, and as you've mentioned a few times, it's changing the mindset and narrative in terms of how we communicate on the side of the bigger pieces. Sometimes we still use Passle actually for some of our bigger pieces within IP Tech, but it's got to be complementary to what we use already. What we're trying to show is that it's just about looking at things in a slightly different way. Passle is a short, quick, fast tool of getting content out, getting the first comment out there on the market, sharing it through your networks. It has to work in that way, and that is how we use it for us within IP Tech. For us, it's about how that fits in. Basically, like talking it in a military way, it's a part of your arsenal. This is a way to use this tool for a value-added way that will get it out to clients. It goes out fast, you can share it to your networks, but it sits alongside other things. So it's just helping them understand the bigger picture of why does Passle work, how does it fit in, and why is it part of the larger narrative in terms of the other BD that they're working on. So for us, it really is positioning it in that way. What we have found is therefore we have slightly changed the way we've done certain launches on certain topics. So if we're going to do a longer form piece of content in the future, we'll do a quick Passle post, get it out, and then we'll say, and in time, come back and we'll be launching a larger piece. So it's talking about how your kind of thought leadership program works in terms of what's your timings, how are you getting things out, helping fee earners understand there is a way to speak to clients immediately. You don't have to wait till something is finished and written. But yeah, it's about being a part of the narrative in terms of how does BD work, how is your thought leadership program going to run, but also what are the other tools that you have at the firm that you're using and how does it fit in?
Yeah, absolutely. Such a key point as well with those tools. You've got tools such as Lexology, you might have other distribution platforms, and it's about making the most of complementing those and not having one that doesn't fit in with another. Each technology enables another one. So same question to you, Jenny. How do you position that at Michael Best?
Yeah, so as Alex said, what we have seen and what we've had several of our attorneys come back and ask us, they're like, I really like this tool, but how do I know when to use it compared to when I should write something? And I think as we've discussed, it's based on how fast you want to get it out to your market and your contacts. Also, do you have a specific view that's very unique? Or do you agree with this article that was just written and you just want to, provide some key tips to your clients and contacts? I think those are the key differentiators. The way I explain it is like, do you want to share a little paragraph and something that somebody already written is exactly what you agree with? Use Passle. Do you want to write your own article that focuses on a key area? Maybe it's a new industry trend, maybe it's new regulatory updates, something to do with litigation, and you have a different perspective that's not in the market. Well, maybe you need to draft an alert, a client alert. Do you have something that is detailed that needs to take about 10 pages to fully explain and give to a set of key clients and contacts? Then that's a newsletter. So it's based on timeliness and length and messaging. So that's kind of what we've come up with at Michael Best to explain the options to the attorneys, because they want to make sure that they're providing their messaging in the best way that is easy for their clients to understand and read. So I think that's a great move in the right direction. And I think that's where we're all kind of heading towards in thought leadership in general in the legal industry. So that's how we've positioned it, and it's been very successful, as you know. So it's working out quite well.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I would add is it's also how do you position in terms of the way we've looked at Bakers is how we're responding to change, and Passle and bringing Passle on board was how we are responding to it. So the market has changed very dramatically over the last few months / over a year now. And we also mentioned previously already, clients, unfortunately, they don't just go to your website anymore and search for the content themselves. They go into Google and ultimately they search a topic. And if it doesn't come on the first page, they're not going to look it up. I'm not sure how many people actually go to the second or third page of Google anymore. If it's not there, it's not there. So it really has been right. Well, if that's the way clients are looking for content, they still want some emails, but I'm sure many other firms have experienced this. They've said to us, we're getting too many, it's too loud, we're not reading them. We were seeing that in our own stats. So therefore, what was the tool that we were going to use to make sure our content is still front of mind to them and still being seen on Google? And basically that is why we're using the post in terms of, right, this is your way to get your content out onto LinkedIn, but also make sure it's in a Google search function. So it filled the need that was there and is continuing to work really well.
Yeah, absolutely. We see it time and time again. You know, our most successful clients, you guys, they just have a clear strategy, and it's clear to the fee owners how they use these different tools. So if they've got a bit of content they want to write, they know whether that goes on Passle or if it's a longer form piece, and you guys do that so effectively. I'm conscious of time, but we've got a little leeway to run a little bit over. But I do have a few final questions I want to ask you both, and there's a few questions from the audience as well that I want to cover. But I think one of the big questions is, you know, what's made this thought leadership program worth it for your firm? You know, what success have you seen off the back of creating content? I'll hand over to you first, Jenny.
I think there's a lot of success that we're seeing. For one, we're seeing a lot more visits to our website via the Insights page. We're seeing a lot more activity and our posts being picked up via Lexology. We're seeing a lot more interaction when our attorneys or team members share information, their posts on LinkedIn. And we're trying to synthesize all of that and really understand it. But I think, you know, that's one of the key things that we're looking at. And, you know, the other things that, you know, we're seeing is, you know, we just had an example of this a week ago. A new user that just started, you know, went through the training a month later, reached out to us, said, I can't remember the training. So can you help me like go through this again? So we got on the phone, went over with her real quick. And basically what happened was they created a couple of posts, and one got picked up by Lexology. And, you know, about a couple of days later, she got a prospect reach out, and it was a very nice, thoughtful email. There was about 3 paragraphs, and basically, you know, is somebody she didn't know, but the person actually liked her post so much that they went to LinkedIn, read about her, and provided, you know, comments about like, oh, I see you're part of this organization. I see you used to work in this area or this city. And then they connected on LinkedIn. And that is an example of a prospect that wasn't there and wasn't even in this attorney's realm of contacts. And they reached out to them saying, I want to connect with you. And I think that's just a great story. And that's something that we want. You know, that's the end all be all. We want to have those conversations, and we want to have those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely amazing. And, you know, if you just look at your graph on Lexology and you're outperforming those, you know, AmLaw 100 firms, so, you know, you see the huge success, which is fantastic. And handing over to you, Alex.
So I'm very competitive. So every time I see that, I'm like, okay, we have to meet or beat this next month, next month. So yeah, that's a core goal of ours, but that's because I'm pretty competitive too.
Yeah, absolutely, it's fantastic. And what success have you seen off the back of the Thought Leadership Program, Alex, at Bakers?
Sure. So I think that we've kind of measured it 2 ways. The first way is just internally, are we seeing countries and fee owners who have been quieter previously being more vocal? And the answer is yes. And that's been really good to see, as Jenny was talking about. The same for us bakers. Like, we really want our juniors to be seen and heard. They are the people advising our clients at the end of the day, and we're just seeing them really engage and just put more content out there, which is really brilliant to see. On the client side, it's two things really. It's like, are we starting conversations, or are we getting work? Which, it's really nice to get work, and I can say quite happily that a couple of our posts have generated work directly from posts that were put on Passle, shared on LinkedIn. And very interestingly, a very, very large consumer brand company then messaged us saying, I didn't realize this IP change in law was happening and I've done nothing about it. I have 3 days to comply. What do I do? And that did turn into fee earning work. So that was really great to see. We've also had fee earning work come in off a couple of other posts. But as Jenny was saying, it's really about conversations. Yeah. Are our clients reading it, being interested in it, and then going back to our fee earners and saying, you know what, is this something I could just have a chat about? It doesn't need to immediately be they're saying, right, I need to instruct you right away. That's great if it does happen, by all means, wonderful. But are they having a conversation, and is it just keeping that relationship going, really, is what we're looking for. And we really are seeing that, especially because when people share those posts mostly onto LinkedIn, it's going to the networks they know, they're friends with, and they like, and it just keeps the narrative going. And it means when they have a catch up or have a meeting, it's not, oh, I last spoke to you 6 months ago when you did this presentation. It's, oh, I saw your post the other day about X. It was a really interesting read. It's just keeping it kind of constant in touch points, which it just really helps relationships. And again, at the junior level, we're seeing that really helps people build those relationships internally. So it's just a good way of keeping things going. But for us, yeah, conversations and, to be honest, direct referrals and instructions are great, but it's more about the conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just about, as you're saying, you're doing this, feeding that success back to the wider firm, because that's what's going to get adoption of your content program, hearing these success stories. And again, just changing the angle slightly on this, what makes it worth it for you guys as drivers of this thought leadership program? You know, does this raise your profile in your firm? Is it, you know, has it changed, you know, your outlook as business developers and how the firm sees you?
Should I go first? I hate talking about myself and saying it in that manner. I think it's definitely helped raise my profile in the firm. To be honest, I think it's more global IP Tech are now sick of seeing emails from me, but at least they know my name. But no, to be honest, from my perspective, I think it's fun working with new technology, to be perfectly honest. I work in IP Tech. I've always worked in IP Tech, so it's something I'm interested in. But working with a new platform, which from my perspective, I think being able to see what you're working on and getting results so quickly and visibly, that really just helps. And it means it's quite fun to work with it. I think other times you spend weeks and weeks on projects, and then sometimes you launch it and it goes into email inboxes and things like that. And we don't always get to see the results. Passle, you get really quick, fast results. So in terms of keeping you going and seeing those results coming in, and therefore encouraging you to keep on it, that really helps. But to be honest, it's a quick and easy, fun tool to use. Like, you haven't paid me to say that, but genuinely, I'm like, it's just like, it's been a really fun project to be working on.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And same question to you, Jenny.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, you know, it's a great tool from a business development standpoint. And, you know, I've been in business development for many years in the legal setting, and it's always like, you have attorneys and team members that want to communicate with their clients and their contacts on a regular basis, but all these things get in the way, right? They're too busy. They don't have time to write a 3-page article or whatever they want to do, or something else comes up from a legal matter. So this is like a great solution, and it's evident in the ability to create those connections and to create those discussions. And, you know, that's my main focus in business development, is to create those opportunities to work internally with my clients, my attorneys and team members, on figuring out ways that we can grow their book of business, that we can add more value to the firm and provide the best value to our clients. And that's the focus for us. So any tool that I can use that makes that easier is fabulous, and that's what Passle does. So I'm like a huge Passle supporter. Everybody knows, like, you know, oh, Passle, go to Jenny, but now I'm like, no, go to the whole BD team, because we're expanding. So we need to make sure everybody is using the tool, and our whole BD team is a part of that. But I think it is fun, it's exciting, it's easy to use, and most importantly, it makes business development easier, and that's what we need right now in the business development.
I have to agree with Jenny on that one. Like, in terms of making life easier, it makes life a lot easier, I have to say.
Yeah.
It just, like, timescales are down and it's just faster to use, to be honest. So no, it's really good.
Brilliant, brilliant. And just conscious of time, because we're going to wrap up now. So thank you everyone for hanging on. But there are 2 questions that I just want you to quickly answer, if that's okay. So firstly, one from Alison, who said, I'm curious what your approval process looks like before a piece of content is published in Passle. Do your thought leaders have to run their post through a proofreader, fact checker, practice group leader, GC's office first?
It's a good question. You know, what we do is we have when a post gets created, it's reviewed by, the person gets to select the editor that they want to review it and proofread it. And that goes to one of our BD team members. It is not reviewed by a practice group leader or any other type of leadership. It is reviewed by the BD team and the person who wrote the post. We proofread it. If there's any things that we have suggestions on, if there's something that we think maybe a conflict of interest from a client perspective, or maybe something we may not want to post about in that particular way and reword it, then we will reach back out to them individually and talk to them about that. But most of the time we review it, we proofread it, we approve it within 2 minutes, and it's live and off we go. So it's really easy, and that's the process that we love. So
great. And same with you, Alex. And then just to add to that as well, how do you handle conflict checks? Do you
Oh, wow. So we all have to work with a wonderful conflicts team. So like, in terms of approval process, we're very much the same. The only slight difference is, so any fee earner writing it, they have to have got pre-approval from their supervisor for any form of publication or writing at our firm. So before anything can even be drafted or written, they have to have got the approval for that topic. It then comes through to the BD team. But the way we have it set up on Passle is, so BD team are the people who ultimately read it, check it, and can approve it. However, our entire knowledge lawyer team also has the ability to view all the posts that come in. So we work very closely with our knowledge team, and they will often come in and say, oh, this is actually a legal error we need to be slightly toned down in our voice about, or we're unable to comment on. So they will bring that opinion in. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
Oh, so the conflict checks and the
conflicts, yeah. So conflicts, basically, so the way we work it is, any post that comes through, if it mentions a client or a company, we run a conflicts check on it. Again, BM, because we're quite a large firm, thankfully we can sometimes push those through very quickly, so we can get a conflict search done in a few hours. However, it does mean that sometimes posts ultimately don't get posted. So sometimes people will draft it, we'll do a full conflict search, and unfortunately there'll be elements we can't talk about, or we just can't post it at all. It is part of the process. Basically, if ever a company is referenced, we have to do a full conflict search. But that's something, again, it's just part of every day for BM. So anything that references a client, we have to do a conflict check.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Okay, and then just to finish off from you both, what would your one bit of advice be for everyone on the call today who is looking to run a successful thought leadership program? Hand over to you first, Jenny.
Define a plan, implement it, but update it, and focus on fun and focus on thought leadership and business development, and it'll be successful. Brilliant.
And Alex?
I can't really improve on that. The only thing I would add is be flexible. If COVID's taught us anything, it's that some flexibility is required. So even if you set a load of objectives at the start and you don't necessarily meet all of them, just be flexible to that plan. Ours is constantly evolving. So just be prepared for that, but also enjoy it. I think a bit of flexibility and change is always enjoyable for the job. So embrace it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us on today's panel. I know we've run over a little bit, so thank you guys for hanging on. There's just so much expertise for Jenny and Alex to share, and I'm sure everyone's had lots of key takeaways. Do link in also with Jennifer and Alex. If you have any extra questions, I'm sure they'll be delighted to answer them and connect with you there. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining our event today, and thank you in particular to Phil, Jenny and Alex, who've been absolutely fantastic, and it's a privilege to listen to all your knowledge and expertise. So just going to hand over to James now to close off the event for today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Really, we're just over time, but hopefully you'll agree that we just had an absolute stack of fabulous advice there. So thank you very much, Phil. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you very much, Jenny. And thank you very much for everyone hanging on and listening into all of that. As I say, we've recorded all of it, so we'll be sharing this with you. Please be sure to get the latest information from Passle by going to blog.passle.net and hitting subscribe. You can choose topics, and you can choose the authors you want to hear from and how often you want to hear from us. So do that. Really, really appreciate you spending the time with us, and we will see you all soon. Thank you.